For the rest of the day, we're supposed to handle the department's communication.
What do you mean, handle?
They're shutting down the police van. All calls will be coming through this switchboard.
And I'm gonna marry Donald Trump. And I'm gonna marry Donald Trump.
Chief, right. Do you think you're a lady, Hillary Clinton?
That's it.
What?
Hillary Clinton, the 42nd president.
Oh, she'd be the 43rd president.
All right, but who's the 21st?
I don't know. Do you think you're a lady, Hillary Clinton?
That's it.
What?
Hillary Clinton, the 42nd president.
Oh, she'd be the 43rd president.
All right, but who's the 21st?
I don't know.
To a world of strange and beautiful magic.
Sometimes I'm afraid that you'll tell me that this is not a work of fiction. I can only hope that the answers will come to me in my sleep. I hope that when the world comes to an end, I can breathe a sigh of relief, because there will be so much to look forward to.
Wake up.
I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad
As doubting Thomases seem to take particular pleasure in popping up on all occasions, Jack in the Box-like, it may be well to head them off in this particular instance by proving that Baron Trump was a real baron and not a mere baron of the mind. Ingersoll Lockwood was an American lawyer and writer that was born in the year 1841. Lockwood was born in Ossining, New York, the son of Munson Ingersoll and Sarah Lewis Lockwood. Ingersoll's father, Munson, was also a lawyer and intimate friend of Henry Clay, representative of Kentucky and also a lawyer. Munson achieved prominence as a military man and civic activist. He was a general in the New York State Militia and commandant of the 7th Brigade. Like his father and uncles, Ingersoll Lockwood also trained as a lawyer, although his first position was as a diplomat. In 1862, he was appointed consul to the Kingdom of Hanover by Abraham Lincoln himself. At the time, he was the youngest member of the U.S. consular force and served in that post for 4 years. On his return, he established a legal practice in New York City with his older brother Henry Lockwood. By the 1880s, Ingersoll had established a parallel career as a lecturer and writer. In 1884, he married Winifred Wallace Tinker, a graduate of Vassar College and aspiring author. He allegedly died in Saratoga Springs at the age of 77 years old. The reason why we know him today is from his Baron Trump children's novels that was written in the year 1892. These novels now hold a prophetic and mimetic nature to them, with all their synchronicities, with the name of the young child in the novel, to all the fantastical places he visits in this Hollow Earth location, where he ultimately ends up time traveling in the center of the Earth. All concepts ahead of their time. But we see this even more so in his other books that he's not as well known for. Besides the Baron Trump books, he wrote several nonfiction works, along with a very prophecy-filled book called 1900, or The Last President, which is a dark foreshadow to future events that he would have no possible idea about. Finally, his most rare work, Laconics of Cult, a complete mirror to his earlier works, going deep into the occult and esoteric knowledge that this man displayed. The character in the book, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, strikingly resembles the Baron Trump of our timeline. Young Baron in the book is helped by the manuscripts of Don Foom, who he uses to find the portals to the world within a world, which were situated somewhere in northern Russia, possibly on the western slopes of the upper Urals. It's quite interesting that today we know that this location has vast underground natural cave networks that were not discovered in the time of Ingersoll Lockwood, but he predicted this in his book. And if we look further down the rabbit hole of these extensive caves in the Ural Mountains, we see that ancient nanostructures have been discovered, almost pointing to an ancient civilization or more mysterious origin to these mountains. Could these mountains be one of the entrances to Hollow Earth? Little Baron Trump in the novel also lives in Castle Trump. Coincidentally, his family is extremely wealthy, but the father of Baron Trump wants to secure his son's fortune for the future. None of these books explain how Baron Trump passes or what happens to him, besides finding a time-traveling portal in the middle of the earth, which ties into other radical theories that the Trump family is associated with time travel. It's important to take note that Lockwood's book about Little Baron Trump was way ahead of its time. It talked about Hollow Earth, time travel, fantastical places and creatures and people that lived inside the earth. Cities of full silver, everything was silver in some of these areas. And they even talked about the goggle zone, which reminded me almost of Google Zone. In the book 1900, or The Last President, it is known as, it predicts that socialists and anarchists will start rioting in New York City from November 3rd and that possibly Trump is the last president. Looking into his next book on our list, 1900, or The Last President. This book predicts that socialists and anarchists will start an uprising in New York City and rioting. The quick rundown of The Last President is commies take over the country. New York falls to social unrest and protests as the rich elite stay in their upper homes. Chicago is taken and people are assassinated by the mob. Last bastion of resistance, the Supreme Court, due to have multiple vacancies from old age. Suddenly an eclipse happens, everyone's afraid. People are believing that the new president has ties to moneylenders and usurers. This is all in a book that was written in the year 1896. There's a part in the book that also states that Chicago celebrated the election of the new president who was to free the land from the grasp of the moneylenders and undo the bad business of years of unholy union between barterers and sellers of human toil and the lawmakers of the land. What was Ingersoll Lockwood talking about in 1896? What did he foresee? How did he forecast these events? Was it divination? Was it channeling? Was it time travel? Was he merely reporting on the events of meeting a real time traveler, possibly named Baron Trump? Another interesting coincidence or synchronicity in this book is one of the cabinet members of this future president, the last president, his Secretary of Agriculture. His name was Leif Pence of Colorado. Very interesting. Could he see the name Pence and he just got the position wrong? Lockwood also started a society for men that were 6 foot 2 inches tall. Coincidentally, Trump is 6 foot 2 inches tall. So is Tesla and Patton are all exactly that height. This was called the Union of the Titans, or the Order of the Titans, and a few links between this society and the Freemasons exist. The majority theory of the people that went down this rabbit hole is that Ingersoll Lockwood either came into contact with time-traveling Baron Trump or was a major facilitator for said person. Just like the young Baron in the book had the manuscripts of Don Foom, the rumor is President Trump has the manuscripts of Tesla from his uncle John Trump, and he has used these articles and technology to run the timelines, to win the presidency, and to continue benefiting this reality. But a darker, more Halloween theory we're about to look into revolves around his final and most rare book on my list. His book, Laconics of Cult, shows what Ingersoll Lockwood was truly involved with. Deep Hermeticism, possibly connected to the origins of the Jesuits and other secret mystery schools. The opening cover of the book shows Ingersoll at the age of 30 and also at the age of 60, where it says under his name, author and originator of the cult of the immortal human. And funny enough, his picture doesn't look like he aged a day. This is back before the age of cosmetic surgery. The only difference is the color of his beard hair. Did Ingersoll find the secret to life? The book talks about the creation of a god, how to make your own god, and he goes into myths about Muhammad, Osiris, Apis, Horus. He talks about Enoch and Elijah, and how they never saw death, and how they were snatched up from this earth as mortals. He writes poems in this book of the immortal human. To the grand and noble soul of my brother Henry Clay Lockwood. He was famously known to be friends with Sir Henry Clay. The tone of this book is almost educational with a flair of mysticism, compared to his fiction books and his prophetical, almost political book, this is a far stretch comparatively. Did Mr. Lockwood form a cult back then? We could see now looking back that he had an extensive insight into future events, into the political landscape 100 years down the line, and into fantastical ideas like Hollow Earth and other topics like time travel. 100 years later, with the election of Donald Trump, the books of Ingersoll Lockwood are now coming back to bring us an eerie take from the past, almost like Nostradamus has done. Was Mr. Lockwood even a real figure in history, or was he completely made up? If we look at the etymology of his name, Ingersoll Lockwood, Inger is derived from the Old Norse Ingvar, itself derived from Yngvi Freyr, the Norse god of sacral kingship, virility, prosperity, and sunshine fair weather, i.e., climate-controlled, be God, not man. Sol is the personification of the sun, and Woodlock, derived from a location in Yorkshire, England named Loch Woodoo in Old English. The meaning is translated one resident at the wood, home enclosed by fencing. So based on the etymology, it can be surmised that the author's name means the one resident of the house secured by fencing that is protected by the God of light, understanding that climate is subject to God and not man, and wishing to bring a sense of masculinity and prosperity to his people. His leadership is ordained by God. There are rumors that Mr. Lockwood was a Catholic back then, but it would be interesting to see if his prophecies were given to him by God or by more occultic and esoteric means. And how does this connect to the theories of John Titor and John Trump, President Trump's MIT uncle who had the Tesla documents? Thank you for watching the video. Please give a thumbs up if you like, give a thumbs down if you don't, consider subscribing if you're new. Thank you very much.
For too many years, our country has tolerated unacceptable delays at the airport, long wait times on the tarmac, and a slowing of commerce and travel that costs us billions and billions of dollars in lost hours and lost dollars themselves. Today, we're proposing to take American air travel into the future, finally, right? Finally. It's a long time. We're proposing reduced wait times, increased route efficiency, and far fewer delays. Our plan will get you where you need to go more quickly, more reliably, more affordably, and yes, for the first time in a long time, on time. We will launch this air travel revolution by modernizing the outdated system of air traffic control. It's about time. Since the early days of commercial air service, the federal government has owned and operated the United States air traffic control system. Yet, more than a half a century later, the government is still using much of the exact same outdated technology. At a time when every passenger has GPS technology in their pockets, our air traffic control system still runs on radar and ground-based radio systems that they don't even make anymore. They can't even fix anymore. But after billions and billions of tax dollars spent and the many years of delays, we're still stuck with an ancient, broken, antiquated, horrible system that doesn't work. Other than that, it's quite good. The previous administration spent over $7 billion trying to upgrade the system and totally failed. Honestly, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. A total waste of money, $7 billion plus. It's time to join the future. At its core, our new plan will dramatically improve America's air traffic control system by turning it over to a self-financing, nonprofit organization. This new entity will not need taxpayer money, which is very shocking when people hear that. They don't hear that too often.
What if time travel were not only possible, but had already happened? If someone in this world were to have this power, who would you want it to be? Well, it's not that person. It's Donald Trump. Let's start with Serbian-American super genius, Nikola Tesla. Tesla's New York City laboratory was where he performed some of his strangest experiments. On March 13, 1895, a reporter came across Tesla sitting in a cafe looking shaken. "I am afraid," said Tesla, "you won't find me a pleasant companion tonight. The fact is, I was almost killed today." He described an experiment he had just performed where, upon being struck by an electromagnetic charge, he was able to see into the past, present, and future simultaneously. He was trapped within this energy field and was only able to escape when an assistant shut off the current. Time travel wasn't the only speculative science he was trying to break ground on. Occasionally, he mentioned a project he called a death ray. Nikola Tesla died in his hotel room in 1943. Although he was a fully naturalized American citizen, his effects were seized by the Office of Alien Property, which assumed ownership of assets that could be used by enemies of the United States. Due to the complicated nature of Tesla's papers, an engineering expert was called in to inspect them. His name was John G. Trump, Donald Trump's uncle. Trump's report concluded that none of Tesla's design contained any invention that could be used against the United States by its enemies. As far as official record goes, that was the end of that. John Trump's career continued. Donald Trump frequently implied that he inherited his uncle's brilliance, and perhaps something else as well. On February 9, 2016, in an interview with NBC, he made a strange statement.
I mean, there's a good gene pool right there. I have to do what I have to do.
What exactly is it that he had to do? To understand, we have to go back again to the late 1800s, when Nikola Tesla was experimenting with time travel. At the same time, another New Yorker was hard at work on something. An author named Ingersoll Lockwood. The name of the protagonist of his two most popular titles? Baron Trump. Baron Trump is a little boy who lives in a mansion called Castle Trump, goes on a mission to Russia to locate a portal that will bring him to a new world, and is guided by directions from a manuscript written by a man whose title is Don. Even more compelling is the fact that his character is a spoiled blowhard who talks up his own courage but makes his way through his journey by screwing people over. While we don't know enough about the real Baron Trump to say if it sounds like him, it certainly sounds like his father.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
In 1896, Ingersoll Lockwood also published a pamphlet called The Last President, which describes the surprise election of a controversial candidate inspiring mobs to march up Fifth Avenue in Manhattan toward the Fifth Avenue Hotel. In 2017, we are all familiar with this exact scene. So what inspired Ingersoll Lockwood to write these stories which uncannily link to present events? It all hinges on the day that John G. Trump was called in to examine Nikola Tesla's papers. That day, John Trump discovers the plans for a time machine in Tesla's papers. He steals them because he can tell from looking at the design that it might be too powerful for responsible use in the hands of the government. However, he uses the plans to build it for himself, thinking it may allow him to accelerate his own research. In the time machine, he sees an apocalypse caused by Tesla's other fabled invention, the death ray. He he can't send himself back because, like Tesla's experiment in 1895 showed, someone else has to operate the machine and nobody else knows how. So he entrusts his nephew Donald Trump, who at the time is a clever young man, to do the traveling. John modifies the machine and sends Donald back to New York City in the 1890s to stop Tesla from inventing the death ray. In the time machine, Donald sees 3 different worlds simultaneously: the past, the present, and the future. In 1890s New York, Donald happens to meet Ingersoll Lockwood and, having seen ahead to the events surrounding his election, as well as the birth of his youngest son, brags about all of it. He is, however, unable or unwilling to intercept Tesla. He returns to the present aware that the end of the world is coming, but ready to profit off the knowledge he gained. He lies to his uncle, tells him the job is done, and sets off on his road to the White House. But time travel is an imperfect science, and the journey caused Donald considerable brain damage, which is becoming more apparent day by day. When it comes time to name the son he knew he'd have, he misspells it, Barron, with 2 R's. Now, as Donald Trump's condition deteriorates, the light he sees at the end of the tunnel is the blinding flash of a mushroom cloud. He knows that total war is his story's inevitable conclusion, and he's actually looking forward to it, as being the president is much less fun than he expected. His ongoing provocation of North Korea's Kim Jong-un is an intentional attempt to usher in the age of destruction that his uncle tried desperately to prevent. Or hey, maybe none of that happened. Everything might be the way it is for completely normal reasons. We'll find out soon enough.
Wasn't that entertaining? Voice your opinions in the comments. Click here to subscribe. Check back every Thursday for more exceptional content.
New threats by President Trump regarding the partial federal government shutdown, now in its 3rd week. The president now says he's willing to let the shutdown last for months or even years.
We told the president we needed the government open. He resisted. In fact, he said he'd keep the government closed for a very long period of time, months or even years.
Major, go ahead. Sure.
Mr. President, Senator Schumer came out and said that the meeting from his point of view and Speaker Pelosi's was contentious. He also said, you said in the meeting, this is him quoting you, I just want to check, that the shutdown could go on for months or even a year or longer. Did you say that? And
I
is
did.
that your?
I did.
Is that your assessment of where we are?
That. Absolutely, I said that. I don't call it a shutdown. I call it doing what you have to do.
President Trump said that may mean keeping the government closed for months or even years.
If we have to stay out for a very long period of time, we're going to do that.
He dug in on demands for his key campaign promise and insisted for the first time that he won't let Congress be the barrier to building a wall.
I may do it, but we can call a national emergency and build it very quickly.
A national emergency would let the president tap Pentagon funds to begin wall construction without congressional approval.
The president also suggested he could build the wall without congressional approval by declaring a national emergency.
The president also said if Democrats in Congress don't give him $5.6 billion for construction of a border wall, he could use emergency powers to divert Pentagon funds for that purpose.
We can call a national emergency because of the security of our country, absolutely. No, we can do it. I haven't done it. I may do it. I may do it.
Even as hundreds of thousands of federal workers fret about missing their next paycheck, Mr. Trump's cabinet secretaries, Vice President Pence, and other senior administration officials are due to receive a roughly $10,000 raise starting tomorrow because of a quirk in the law.
I heard you use the word crisis. I heard you use the word emergency, citing this Post piece. So is this a signal that the president will declare one at some point, perhaps this week?
Well, as he has said, it's something that he's looking at and considering.
I may declare a national emergency dependent on what's going to happen over the next few days.
Right, and on that point, so every year the government pays out billions in tax refunds. What will a delay in returns mean for the greater economy without that money in circulation?
Yeah, I mean, it's $140 billion in February. Yeah. It's with a B, okay?
Right.
And that's a tremendous amount of money. That could single-handedly, push the country towards a recession if that money is not put into the economy. A lot of people get their tax refunds and go immediately spend it on something, or they pay down their credit card. This money gets pumped back into the economy quickly, and we've never had a situation before where this just doesn't happen.
Use the R word, though. I want to be very clear here. I mean, is that a realistic possibility that, in fact, not having that money in circulation could, in fact, drag down things economically so far that it could push the country into recession?
This idea that this money will not be put into circulation, this $140 billion, then you're pushing it really close to a possible recession scenario. Recession means that essentially that the government does not grow and it contracts. The economy contracts over the course of a period. So, as these things begin to snowball, so if people don't get their tax refunds, they stop buying things, then companies get hit and they don't reinvest or hire new workers. All those things can kind of collide into a big economic mess, and I think we're anticipating that will happen in February unless all these things get resolved quickly.
You ran your campaign promising supporters that Mexico is going to pay for the wall, and that the wall was going to be made of concrete. You just said earlier that the wall could be made of steel, and right now our government is shut down over a demand from your administration that the American taxpayer pay for the wall. So how can you say you're not failing on that promise to your supporters?
Very nice question, so beautifully asked, even though I just answered it.
You didn't
answer.
Look,
let me just tell you,
excuse me.
Are you ready? Are you ready? I just told you that we just made a trade deal, and we will take in billions and billions of dollars, far more than the cost of the wall. The wall is peanuts compared to what the value of this trade deal is to the United States. As far as concrete, I said I was going to build a wall. I never said, I'm going to build a concrete. I said I'm going to build a wall. Just so you don't, because I know you're not into the construction business, you don't understand something. We now have a great steel business that's rebuilt in the United States. Steel is stronger than concrete.
President Trump is refusing to end the shutdown until he gets $5 billion for a border wall. But Democrats have a plan. They're going to make Trump wear one of those blindfolds from Bird Box and just tell him there's a wall. Don't take it off. Don't take it off.
Is that a wall?
The president was asked about all the unpaid federal workers who are struggling to pay their bills, and Trump responded saying that he, quote, can relate. It makes sense. I mean, no one's more relatable than Donald Trump, right? He's just a regular working class family man.
So many programs affected by this shutdown. Turns out the government does a lot of things. Who knew? Including food stamps, subsidized school lunches, the EPA, the USDA, and the Smithsonian and National Zoo. And you can tell they're upset about it if you look at the National Zoo's Panda Cam.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders tweeted today that President Trump will travel to the southern border on Thursday. And what do you know? Mexico finally started building that wall.
As the partial government shutdown enters week 3 with no end in sight, we're getting a picture of how the fight in Washington could affect people across the rest of the country. If Congress and the White House can't come to a deal to fund a quarter of the government by February, millions of Americans who receive benefits from the country's food stamp program, SNAP, risk having their assistance cut off. The IRS has also been forced to send home 90% of its employees ahead of its busiest season. That could delay tax refunds.
In the U.S. Capitol, it's do not enter, stay out, closed for business.
If you come to D.C. to visit, you can visit the Lincoln Memorial, but the toilets are closed, the gift shop is closed, and the park police patrolling and protecting this area, they're not getting paid. We're into the 3rd week now of this government shutdown. 800,000 federal workers furloughed or working without pay. And as every day progresses, the concern is that the fallout is going to spread. A new day of the government shutdown bringing new concerns about the impact on Americans, especially those relying on the federal government to get by. One of the programs in jeopardy, food stamps. Nearly 39 million people use it to feed their families, and it's quickly running out of funding.
I won't be able to come in here and buy my groceries.
Getting married? Lovebirds in the nation's capital may have to put those wedding bells on hold after the marriage bureau that issues licenses in D.C. was closed.
Empty pockets of all personal effects, please.
The paychecks for TSA officers won't land in their bank accounts later this week if the government still has the out-of-office message. Some of those screeners calling out sick in protest, though the TSA union is urging them not to.
The standoff is also now affecting travelers. Wait times are up at many airports as some screeners call out sick rather than work without pay.
Flyers at New York's LaGuardia Airport yesterday had to wait in nearly hour-long security lines. The TSA blamed a higher-than-expected number of travelers coupled with mismanaged resources for the delays. But the agency is worried lines will get longer if more TSA screeners call out sick due to the ongoing government shutdown. TSA officials are concerned Friday's payroll deadline, when screeners will miss their first paychecks, could be a tipping point. Many of the more than 51,000 screeners cannot afford to miss a check, and officials fear they may not come to work.
The Airline Pilots Association calling on President Trump to end it, concerned that with air traffic controllers potentially and also TSA officers potentially working without pay, it puts the nation's airspace at risk.
800,000 federal workers are not being paid. Farmers aren't getting their government subsidies. Pilots are warning about airline security as TSA officers work without paychecks. Christine Vittel, a single mother, works for the TSA at Chicago O'Hare.
I live 39 miles away from the airport. That's one way. My gas is what takes up my money, right? I could go probably one more pay period without getting paid, but most people can't go one more day.
The president doesn't understand that we are human beings. We are people. Federal workers, that's just like, words, federal workers. No. I am the federal worker. He is the federal worker. We are people. We have bills to pay. We have food we need to eat to survive just like everybody else. It's not a game to us. I mean, it seems like it's a game to him. Oh, I'll keep the government shut down for months, for years. Well, what about the 800,000 people? Do you even care? Do you have a heart?
800,000 federal employees have been furloughed or are working without pay. The Smithsonian's museums, the National Zoo, and National Gallery are closed. You'll also see nothing on the live web feed of the National Zoo's PandaCam, which ceased broadcasting on Wednesday. Most NASA employees are on furlough, except for those deemed essential to, quote, prevent imminent threats to human life or the protection of property, though they are working without pay.